Okay, yeah, this is Frank Bill, and my book Back to the Dirt follows a factory working vet by the name of Miles, and the terminal he gets into of thinking he's going to lose his job. Steroid deal goes bad, and he's in search of his girlfriend who can't be found that may or might not have be involved in a murder, and things go really wild and trippy between booze and LSD and a lot of bad decisions.
I really want to start out talking about the book by acknowledging how unsubtle the book is at the beginning about being at least to some degree inspired by your father and his experiences in Vietnam. Am I right about that? Because like there's a dedication at the beginning, and then almost at the very beginning of the book, what you are explaining about Miles, the main character, sounds pretty much exactly like what you established in that dedication, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. Miles is like a combination of me and my time in the factory and things that I had to deal with, but then the stories and the people I work with over the years, because I've been there almost 30 years. Um, and then the other part is just the things that my father would talk about. And then I had some sit down conversations with him about different things. The one thing I didn't get to sit down and talk to him about was like when he got injured. I didn't get to talk to him, which is a hard thing. That's a hard subject to talk about with my dad, even though he would talk to me about it because basically somebody stepped. He was a minesweeper, and they had different roads that went from, or they called them, would go from the road to go to another hill, which is the other hill would be another base. You had like a special forces base, a recon base, and then recon units also come into where he was at with just a regular Marine crew and I guess basically the tanker division that he was serving with. And he had to sweep that road every day um, in front of the tanker, or, the tanker division to make sure they didn't run over any landmines or anything. And then when somebody found something, one of the other guys had found a landmine, and when they went to dig it up, I guess they either stepped on it or went to dislodge it from the ground. Well, it blew up and killed that guy, but that guy getting killed blocked my dad from getting killed also, but he ended up getting hearing damage and some other things. There was a big write up about it in the newspaper here, our town paper, and he basically helped. There was another battle called Operation Allenbrook, where uh, I think it was like an 8-hour firefight, and it pretty much killed everybody in the
Wow.
platoon. But a couple of guys that didn't get killed, and whenever they finally finished with that little battle or whatever, he ended up. I think sustaining some wounds, but he ended up staying and helping to load the dead. Even though he was hurt, he put himself before everybody else to help out. And then I got to meet one of the guys that he helped save, which my dad hadn't talked to him since that had happened. This is just probably about 10 years ago. They finally got to meet again. Come to find out, the guy had been coming to Louisville, Kentucky for the past like 20 years because he's in horse racing. And my dad didn't know it. But they connected because my dad had went back to research to get his Purple Heart because they owed him a Purple Heart and he never got it. So he had to reconnect with some of the people who were still alive. And that was one of the guys he reconnected with. And when I got to go over and meet him, that's what my dad said, "Man, you look a lot better than that day than you did when we had that firefight." He said, "Man, you look better than me." He said, "What the hell have you been eating and drinking?" That's just my dad. My dad's very comical about stuff. There's always the dark humor with him. But yeah, the opening is actually comes from a real story from a guy that I worked with named, he doesn't work there anymore. His name was Bruce. And when he was younger, there was a guy that owed him money on night shift that had borrowed money from him. And he wasn't into steroids or anything, but he owed the guy owed him money. I don't know if it was for food or drugs or what it was, and he got tired of asking the guy to pay him back, so he finally just basically beat the shit out of the guy and took him to the ATM and said, "Get the money out because you owe me." And it's one of those things that just stuck with me. You just have to know this guy because he was really a hard worker, but he talked like a sailor. But he had a heart of gold. But every other word was "mf this" and "sob," and but that's kind of the culmination of how I pulled all those things together. Um,
Yeah.
this book is probably about the most autobiographical book that I've written as far as story wise, really pulling from myself, my family, and where I work, and just the different hardships of war.
Yeah, that was going to be the other part that I was going to mention was the Well, first of all, kind of the location that things take place in, and the working in the factory, I knew that was, if not inspired by your personal experience, then something that you knew about. So, yeah, that's definitely the impression I got knowing you. And I got to imagine that probably people who aren't as familiar with you personally might not pick up on that. But like, I was like, oh yeah, Frank's really pulling from, stuff that's close to home. So
Yeah, even the explosion, because that was the explosion that's in the book. That was me. I had to basically I had to rip an air conditioner unit out of the wall and climb through an air conditioner duct to get out of the building when it blew up
wow,
with a dust explosion. Yeah.
that's that's
Yeah, I mean,
how long ago did that happen?
really pulled from a lot of stuff from either life experience, just it's there's a lot of truth in the book. That's the
Yeah,
actual factory, everything that's in there. That's really happened. We used to have a foreman. It was really kind of hard nosed. He was kind of racist, and you had to deal with that kind
yeah,
of stuff. He didn't really care. He called it shitbirds all the time. I mean, it was things back then that you're in a factory, which I understand. And you're going to have jokes and all that kind of stuff. There's no salty language is pretty much what you have. But he didn't
yeah,
care. He ran his building the way he wanted to run it, and that's how it was going to be ran.
yeah. How long ago did that explosion happen? Because
That
that's
was around
insane.
2006, somewhere around in there.
Wow.
Yeah, because my wife could attest to it because I was talking to her on the phone. I was in a downstairs office, and you have these two spray dryers out the window you see, and the spray dryers basically spin it. Gosh, I forget how fast it is, like 600 miles per hour, and it whips the the wet clay in there, whips it around all this wheel inside, and it shoots it against the walls of the spray dryer. And that spray dryer is like 350 degrees, and when it hits the walls, it hits that, it dries, and it rolls down those walls, and it goes into a feed screw, goes up through some conveyors and stuff, and separates some bad stuff to keep the good powder, and then it comes down and fills a bin up, and then you go to this machine and you put a bag on there and you fill that bag up, 50 pounds, it's done. You start the next one, you're stacking them up. The thing is that dust is highly explosive and flammable. Now, if it piles up
Yeah.
in there, it's not. Okay. Well, there used to be metal detectors within the system because sometimes maintenance does stuff and a screw or something can fall in there. It just depends if they're working on something, and everything's really self-contained. And they had these. I tried to explain it within the context of the book. They were these gray. They were called halon balls, and if it recognized three different things, which what makes fire. You have to have air, you have to have heat, and flame, explosion, whatever. It recognizes as soon as it gets some type of a sensor for a flame within the system, it disperses. Well, I'm on the phone, and these are all over this system from the spray dryer all the way down to the feed screws, the bag house, and to where the bagging machine's at. And I can look out the window. I'm talking to my wife because we were married. We always go to Brown County, Indiana, and I was talking on the phone because we're talking about making plans where we're gonna go up there for our anniversary. Well, all of a sudden I start hearing, okay, I'm like, that's a fucking halon ball. And then I hear another one's going off. Well, each one of those balls is chasing this flame through the system, and then the next thing I know, when it gets to the very end, there's an area where you could check the feed screw to make sure you're getting material. Somebody didn't have that. Uh, uh, they didn't have it latched down like it's supposed to. So it blew that open. And when I seen it blow open, a flame about the size of if you were standing behind an airline, and the blue flame that comes out for a jet, it shot up. It was about 4 feet round and went up about 20 feet up in the air. And I said, "Fuck!" I think I hung up on her, and my immediate reaction was to get underneath the desk because there's a desk there and do the old tornado drill and put my hands on my head. And as soon as I did that, I just heard kaboom, and something hit the door, which there's a safety railing that goes around, and that boom that hit the door it blew the rail off, and it blew it like, I don't know, probably about 20 feet away, and it blew it off. It's steel. It broke all the welds. Well, not only did it break all the welds, it busted up all this iron and metal. It blew it all apart that connected to the bag house. So whenever I came out from underneath the desk, I look out the window. All I see is black, and I hear air. I'm thinking gas. I'm thinking there's a gas leak, which it wasn't. It was actually air. And I'm thinking, well, the lights are out. Well, no, I go to crack the door. There's no lights in the building. That is black dust. And I'm like, I can't leave the office to go open the door because I thought about it. I'm like, well, if I cover my mouth, could I get out of here? I'm like, no, as soon as I inhale that, it's organo clay. It's gonna kill me. I wouldn't have made it. So then I'm like, kind of like, I go through the motions of how do I get the fuck out of here? Excuse my language. I'm looking at the ceiling. I pull the ceiling apart, and it's all braced in with 2x6s. And I look over at the air conditioner duct. Now I said, I'm going out the duct, and they had this air conditioner all bolted in. And I just grabbed it and I ripped. I didn't even. I tugged one time and ripped it out of the wall. Threw it on the floor. Climbed into the air conditioner duct. Get to the end. Well, it's reinforced with metal at the end, so I had to pull myself back out. And I went in feet first, and then I kicked it out, and it came out in the alleyway there beside our building. And then I heard some people out there going, "Oh, there's Frankie, there's Frankie." I'm like, "Yeah." EMS shows up, and they're looking for the material safety data sheets for the fire department and everything like that. And they put me in EMS. I forget, my blood pressure was like 140 over something. It was fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
So
an actual event.
that was
It was intense.
um that that was crazy. And that's honestly, like, of the stuff that I read, I was thinking, oh, that was something that maybe that was something that he was fearful of happening or had heard would happen. I didn't think that that was something that came from a real experience. So that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
that's what happened.
What what's the end of the story if you weren't in that office
If somebody would have
at
been
the
out there, they
time?
would have been dead. That was the other thing,
Yeah.
that the guy that the one bag house, or the one bagging machine, because it wasn't my bagger, it was another guy's. The one guy had just finished bagging it out. And he went upstairs. From upstairs, that's what my chief had came out, and he's like, he couldn't. He thought about coming downstairs, but he couldn't get to me because it was just black. Everybody went out the back of the building and came back. And
Yeah.
that's when they came back around. They're coming through. It's kind of like an alleyway, because there's an alleyway that leads to our other warehouse. When we come out and you get a finished product, it's wrapped on a pallet. You drive out the alleyway, take over the warehouse, and then come back. So, yeah, everybody's like trying to figure out where I'm at, and what the hell just happened. So
Yeah.
it was interesting, to say the least.
um, so from the present day life of Miles, that, like you mentioned, so he's working in this factory. There's an element to the story where like that initial kind of conflict with a coworker is about steroids, and the way that it starts out, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be some steroid stuff, some like illegal steroid use stuff, and that ended up being less of a presence in the story than I expected it to be.
Right.
Um, so where did that draw from, like stuff that you'd seen in life or anything, or was that just
Just,
a way
I
to
mean, I know some
like,
people who've done steroids, but it's more about, why do people do steroids? Because everybody always gives steroids a
yeah,
bad rap, and a lot of it has to do as you get older, testosterone dives, and as a guy, you're trying to keep fit if you're into lifting weights and things like that, or strength training, and you're fighting age. The older you get, you're always fighting
yeah,
age. It's just something that we do, and that was something that kind of stuck in my brain, because I kind of feel like we all do as men. We're always fighting age. We're wanting to, you when you wake up in the morning, you're a little more stiff than you used to be. You've been able to do something, it hurts a little bit more, and just from lifting weights and stuff. I mean, I know how it is. I don't use steroids by any means,
yeah.
but
Yeah, and that's honestly the way that it tied into the life of Miles. Totally made sense, because it seemed like, post war, it was a person who, like, in everyday life had, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, not habits or behaviors, but like an expectation of their physical self.
sure.
And like you said, with age, that becomes harder and harder to accomplish. So like, yeah, it tied in nicely with uh, developing almost the not not habits. Why I'm really stumbling with words. Um, like the way that Miles thinks life should be, or the things that he finds important, or something like that. Priorities, maybe priorities is the word I was trying
Right,
to think of.
yeah, because I mean, you have to look at it. If he was a Marine recon, that's an elite unit back in the day, and it still is today. It's changed. So I think it's called the soft unit now, which stands for something else, but it's basically a recon unit. Um, and you were you were high level. Well, as you age, you kind of lose that high level that you could once do. So you're constantly questioning that. How do I keep that? You don't want to lose a grasp of that. And that ties into everything you do in your life, from making correct choices to leadership, and all those types of things. That's why a lot of people continue strength training when they get older, is because you may not feel like doing it, but it does help you get out of bed, and it does help you keep picking things up and not having to ask somebody for help. That's I
Yeah.
can attest to it at my job. I mean, I got guys that are just a little bit older than me to go to do something. I'm like, hey, I'll climb up here and grab it. And they're like, how the hell are you climbing up there? I said, well, because I move every day. You've got to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different things that it helps, and that kind of tied into him, as a as a military guy, because I guess discipline would be the word. You know,
Yeah. Thank you. I
discipline.
don't know why.
Because that's what the military
Um,
teaches you. That's how you make progress to those officer units and what have you. Yeah, it's always about discipline.
yeah. I actually can kind of empathize. So, like, we talked a little bit beforehand about how I had gone through cancer, and obviously there was some treatment for that. And my big thing is reading. So it's nothing physical. It's nothing like
Sure.
active. But um, there was a point during my treatment where I had read. I was reading a book, and I had spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes reading, and I was just like, my brain can't do this. And it's because I had all this, I was basically being poisoned for,
Right.
months. And I like was so it's one of those things where it's like you don't really understand how important it is to you until you feel like it's being taken away.
Yep.
So like when I was reading this, I was thinking, I totally understand, because like if I started to lose my mental faculties, it would be, I would do whatever I want, whatever I could to kind of like maintain that level.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah, to hold a grasp on it as well as you can.
yeah,
Whatever to keep, because you don't have control of certain things sometimes, and you're trying to maintain that control and find things that can help you maintain that control, or
yeah,
understand how to control things better, or slow the progression. All of those. Yeah, definitely.
yep, yeah. So yeah, I identified with that. I was like, I get it, buddy. um, so the and I'm not gonna walk through like beat by beat what happens in the story, so I'll probably jump around a little bit, but because there's just some themes that I picked up on. And so, like, in order to talk about one thing that I thought was interesting, we got to talk a little bit about some of the other characters. So you've got Miles is the ostensibly pretty much the main character, the protagonist.
Yep.
And then a close second would be Shelby, the girlfriend,
Yes.
um, who has a brother named Wiley. Um, and Wiley has a interaction early on with someone who is selling drugs.
Yes.
The drug, like Oxy. I think it's Oxy, right? I can't remember.
Yeah, because at the time when I wrote the book, oxycodone was really big, which now it's fentanyl. Basically like a
Yeah,
derivative. They're all derivatives of one another. But yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, and it was that like, so the interaction is like there's this person who's selling Oxy, and then they don't have what Wiley wants, and so there's like a confrontation, and it goes as badly as it can, and that's kind of one of the early conflicts of the story. But what I think is interesting about what really stuck with me about I can't remember the name of the character who was the one who was dealing the Oxy.
Oh, the brother. Yeah.
Nathaniel's brother.
Yeah, Nathaniel's brother. Gosh,
So, but that's okay.
that's
So
true.
the thing that I found interesting about that, and I think it's kind of thematic in the book, and what I'm getting toward is,
Bedford.
so Nathaniel's.
Bedford and Judy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Bedford.
Yeah,
Bedford.
Bedford.
Bedford and Judy. Yeah.
Um, it's made clear that it seemed like this Bedford character was kind of on the straight and narrow, and something bad happened in their life. They were on. Was he on? He's on some sort of disability, or was unable to move, or
He
something
was
like that,
working
right?
at the Kellers here in Corden. He hurts his back, and he ends up getting addicted, just like everybody else who
Yep.
ends up doing.
Yeah.
It's a at the time before Oxy. They realized what Oxy was doing to people. Getting addicted to it. You know, I don't know if
Yep.
what is the movie or the TV series? I think it's is it Dope Sick, and it kind of explains the whole progression of how everything happened. Doctors didn't
Yep.
realize what they're prescribing to people and what they were actually doing to people until it was too late. And then you ruined all these lives.
Yep.
Um,
And so what I thought was compelling for me about that character, and then also I guess Wiley in a way, is like they were people who were just normal everyday people who you wouldn't consider to be criminals, and one thing goes wrong and it totally changes the course of their lives in like the worst way.
yep.
Um, so I have to imagine, especially like if you were writing it around the time that Oxy was such a plague basically for people, that those stories weren't hard to come by. But it's a really compelling thing. So was that how is that inspired for you? Because it happened in multiple characters in the book, so it has to be kind of an important theme in some way.
Well, originally, I started writing this the same time I wrote The Savage, and that was like around 2011, I think. And I think we sold this around 2012, 2013.
Mm,
And the rough draft was the rough draft. Pretty much the first part of the story pretty much stayed intact. The second part of the story changed a lot because originally Nathaniel was more of a villain, and I came back and reworked that entire because it was a rough draft too. Um,
mm,
and basically with those two characters, what I had was his best friend is something that ends up basically using him the doctor shop. That was his whole thing. Makes him
yeah,
doctor shop, and in order for him to doctor shop, he realizes that he can make money that way too because he's on disability. Disability is just not going to cut it. But he's also trying to raise a son, and uh, those. It seems like when I was writing that, there was actually a story or stories that I'd been reading in the local papers when I was doing a little bit of research on top of probably other family dramas tied to Oxy. Because that's what I always pull from different things and then research them and get as much as I can as close to the truth. So yeah, um,
yeah,
and it just how I mean, it's like you went through cycles. You went from Oxy, and then you had meth, and now you have fentanyl. I think even Opain is another one, which is a derivative of Oxy, or not of Oxy, but of fentanyl. Opain had pretty much destroyed or decimated Austin, Indiana here a few years back in like 2015, 2014. It was horrible. I mean, just destroyed the entire town. So it, painkillers, man. I try to stay away from
yeah,
them. I mean, they're poison. I mean, it's horrible.
yeah, yeah. And I didn't really. So what I am discovering about myself is like when I'm reading something, I try to see like how can I like connect a feeling I've had to like what's going on. And my aunt and uncle worked union jobs when I was really young, and we're in good shape and everything, and they were on a good trajectory and everything, and they got laid off, and there was like that kind of moment of desperation for them where they chose to go into some criminal stuff, and it ended up being something where it was horrible and it kind of ruined a lot of stuff for them, and so when I see this type of thing in your story, for me, the thing I pull out of it is like that something happened to these people and it pushed them in a direction that was devastating. And so like, I'm grateful that, and I haven't really approached watching the documentaries about Oxy or like that Dope Sick show, because I feel like I have to get in a nice mental place to do that first, because it's going to be really grim. But it's nice that there's more kind of people talking about like this is something that was done to people and for very greedy reasons, and like it's not a weakness of an individual person. Like
No, no,
the real evil happened, and it was devastating to people in ways that like it's kind of hard to see at the surface.
right. Well, when I write about characters like that, I mean, they're flawed, yes, but they've reached that point where they don't realize what they're doing, and before it's too late, you're wrapped up into something, and now this is all you. You only see that that's your only way out. Not only are
Yep.
you addicted, but that's also become your income. So what am I supposed to do now? It's
Right.
yeah, it's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, yeah. So that's definitely part of the book that I was like, okay, there's, it's all too common. And like, yeah, especially if it was then that you were writing it, like I can see that it would be like a big deal, but it's always something new. Like you were saying, like it's not something that's going to be easy to make go away.
No, and the sad thing is that with things like painkillers, is that when they get rid of one, there's always something else they're going to put on the market, and somebody else is going to manipulate it. It's a
Yep.
never-ending cycle. Basically, it's a vicious cycle, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It's never ending.
Yeah. But it's, yeah. I don't know. I don't have a follow up to that. It's
Well,
yeah.
the
It's
book
just
is
an awful
it's a
thing.
very bleak book, and I mean it shines a light on what you want to call it flyover country, Midwest, but there's a lot of truth and honesty in it.
Yeah.
Most of the reviews we received back from pretty much all of them were positive. If not spectacular.
Hmm.
Even like the Kirkus review, it it like hints around that it kind of wants to not go to the point to say that they liked it, but everything they say about it reads but it reads like the jacket copy of a book. It gives it
Yeah.
all good marks. They just wouldn't. They just basically kept saying, this is very bleak. It is, because when these are the material and the subject matter is not going to be rosy. I don't write rosy
Right.
books. There's no puppy dogs and cuddles and kisses, because that's just not what I write. I genuinely pull
But
from what I pull from what I know and what interests me. I think it's things that need to be talked about.
right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Totally. And so this might just be me too interpreting, and I've discovered that through years of talking to authors after book. Sometimes I read into things differently than maybe the author intended, but I found this book to be pretty non-violent, if that makes sense. Like there's no real, I think a lot of the drama, at least for me, the way I took it in, a lot of the drama, a lot of like the hard stuff and the bleak stuff that you're talking about is like internal
Yeah,
to the people, to the
it's
characters.
like inner demon.
um
Yeah,
yeah, inner demons, yes, absolutely. And so like for me, and then it actually, to the point where I was questioning myself, I was like, think back to Frank's other books, how much actual literal violence was there versus like the inner demons kind of stuff.
right.
And so I was questioning myself. So like in my mind, this is a less overt literal violence book and more of that other stuff, that inner demon stuff. Does that track with how you feel about it, or am I in my head
Because I
about that?
think it's a personal book. It deals with there's a lot of themes in it. There's gun violence. There is mental health, um,
Yeah.
personal health. The inner demons things. Uh, the societal norms. How do the societies get affected by different things, and then the horrors of war. I mean,
Yeah.
there's you can even call it a horror novel. I mean, because it's psychological. It's very psychological with the mental part,
Yep.
even with the main character and the female character. And then even a brother who loses his brother. There's just all these psychological parts of the book that just I had good editors. Well, I always have good editors, but they really, I mean, the notes that I got on this, and for me to sit down and really pick apart and really brainstorm out to make things much better, than they were, was a major help. You know, I pulled as much as I could from everything that I know, and everything that I've dealt with or people I've known. So yeah, it's definitely all there.
Yeah. Um, Another kind of big thing, and we haven't really talked much about Shelby. And I think I'm timid about talking too much about Shelby because of stuff that happens later in the book. But
Sure.
I have to imagine that it was pretty intentional that Miles has war trauma and stuff that is a constant presence in his life, and then Shelby has her childhood trauma plus any other trauma that's happened since then that is a constant presence in her life. So um, obviously they're kind of analogs for each other, and their relationship to me, was there an intentional kind of like they fit together because like few people understand how they're feeling or like the way they get, or was that part of it?
Yeah, it was it's like two broken souls, even though there was an age gap. You know what I mean? And a lot
Yeah.
of the trauma came from the things that I heard as a kid. With I had having an abusive World War II grandfather, and I never met the guy until I was much much older. But the horror stories I hear from my grandmother and my mother, and the abuse that they went through, and it kind of tied into that whole psyche of that character. And I kind of built on it from there. And then, of course, my dad serving in Vietnam, my grandfather serving in World War II. There's these two people that have post traumatic stress, which my dad's kind of a different generation, but it was similar to the generation of World War II. But World War II really didn't talk about shit. Vietnam
Yeah.
later on realized it was okay to talk. My dad talks to people in group. Not necessarily therapy for him, which it is, I'm sure, therapy for him, but he talks to people about what he's been through, and it helps other people open up too. And I try to tile those psychological factors of what war does to somebody, but then also abuse as a young kid and growing up and having to deal with that. Because I watched my grandmother and my mother and grow up with that. I don't think
Yeah.
either one of them ever come to terms with it, but that was a big source in the book was mental health. Because people,
Yeah.
it's very overlooked in the U.S. People don't get help for it. And I've had family members that have had mental health issues, and it's horrible to see that your government doesn't help you with it. It's pathetic. That it just kind of gets blown off. We got more important things to worry about. Well, not really. We don't, because these are people that live here and they're citizens. They should be taken care of just like everybody else. Um,
Yeah.
but
It's another thing that is done to people in a way, like another evil that's visited on people.
right.
The from reading it, one of the things that was kind of a baseline in my head as I'm reading the story is like there's a whole lot of like internal um it's like there's a fire raging in someone's head and no one can see it. So the way they treat that person, they don't have the context of like this person's got so much other stuff that's influencing them internally that they don't necessarily know, oh, this person is also dealing with the trauma that never goes away. So I got that was kind of something that was kind of present for me as I was reading through it. Like,
Yeah, they're carrying it with them day to day. On the outside, they look like a normal human being, but on the inside, it's like there's a maniac inside of them, but you don't realize,
yeah,
or like a split personality, that kind of thing. Yeah, definitely.
right. Yeah. And so like to that point, Miles as a character to me, my walking away from that book when I was done reading the whole thing, um, my impression as a person who doesn't have that in my life is better man than me. Like I don't know if I would be able to be that person
Right.
and make the choices he did. So a respectable person for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that that helped influence a lot of things with Miles was my dad, of course, being in the war. But the guy that had gotten, if I remember correctly, the guy that got blown up, I think was actually from Louisville, Kentucky. Pretty sure that guy was. And my dad always talked about that, he had looked up the family and wanted to call and talk to him and tell him what happened and that he knew him, but he just never could do it. It's just something he couldn't. It's something he always lived with and carried with him, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a lot of the influences that went into that character, was just little things I carried around from notes and everything, and tried to perceive a much bigger picture to that. Um,
Hmm.
but then the other side of that is too, a book that I'd read for research was gosh, tigers. Is it not? It's not flying tigers. Tiger, is it Tiger Force? I think it's Tiger Force. Was a uh, special forces unit that towards the end of the war, um, they basically started pulling these guys in, and it became a war of numbers. And they basically said, "Hey, um, we're not so much worried about the enemy anymore. It's just you just start killing everybody. That's not a U.S. soldier. It's a VC. You just go in, you wipe out villages." And these guys, two New York Times reporters, went in and researched all this way back, following everybody that had actually lived. And those guys that were part of those units were just, if they were still alive and were telling these stories, it was just horrifying what they were dealing with. In modern day, they couldn't live in normal society anymore because of what they had done. because they were killing innocent
Yeah.
people basically, which that goes into part of the book, because they end up hunting a unit that basically does the same thing. So I know that's
Yeah.
actually, I think that book was, or not that book, but the story for that book before that book ever came out was where Apocalypse Now came from. That whole
Gotcha.
idea. So it kind of spawned my idea too, because there's a reality there, of
Hmm.
more war stories that people don't know about, and I think in the actual book, I think one of the main guys was, he was an Indian from an Indian reservation. He was one of the head guys on one of those, and when they found him, I mean, he was living in a burnt-out trailer and on drugs and everything else because of everything he'd done. He just never come to terms with it. It totally screwed the rest of his life up, which I can only
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
War is a horrible thing, and I mean, that's one of the things I talk about at the end of the book whenever I wrote the afterword, because I had thought about joining the military twice, and my dad was pretty much, yeah, he respects the military, but he really didn't want his son joining the military. And if he would ever taken me to the recruiter's office, I would have probably went and joined. But he just never really showed an interest there and didn't really want me to do it. I mean, even when the Afghan Iraq War, whichever one it was, I mean, he even talked about it when they were talking about, rumors were going around that they were going to open the draft again. He's like, "You're not going. I'll go before you go." And I'm like, "I think I have a say in it, Dad." He's like, "No, I will." This time he was still in the military. He ended up reenlisting like years later, back in the early '80s. He reenlisted into the Army Reserve, and he retired from that after like 22 or 23 years. And he was still in the service whenever the when Iraqi Freedom or whatever started. I think it's what it was. Is that the second one? Yeah, the second Iraqi War. Whenever that conflict started,
Right.
yeah, he was still enlisted, but yeah, he just did not want me going.
Well, he knew stuff you didn't.
He
So,
did. He did. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
he could sit down and tell you more stories that are not even in the book. I mean, yeah, you could sit down and talk to him, and it's just, it still rattles off in his head because that's what he's seen every day. Sweeping, he was either sweeping those roads every day to make sure that there weren't landmines, or they were out on a search and destroy mission out in the jungle somewhere. He could tell you, going
Yeah.
to the different villages and stuff that were around the area. And that's the other thing. I have a good many of the pictures that he took while I was over there. He took a lot of photos, and brought them back.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, some of them are in the book too.
Yeah. Um, all right. So on that, one of the things that happens is, in Miles's past, was, or I guess in the book that pops up several times, is the whole like being accused of like hunting other American soldiers, more or less. So, did that come up through your research, or is that, like something you heard through
That's what I was talking
something more
about.
closer?
That's what that other book was about. That it was based,
Right. Right.
where
Okay.
Apocalypse Now was based from, was that my spin was that they were actually hunting those guys. That they were hunting
Gotcha.
these basically these GIs that went rogue with the government that you didn't know about. They were just going just to kill anybody that was a VC, or they were good or bad. They were just killing innocent farmers, yeah, that kind of thing. Because it became a war of numbers towards the end of the war.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because like that lined up, but like, yeah, the whole idea that well, the thing for me was, now that this person basically chose to do the right thing, the decision was unpopular because it was like you were going against your own, and so now
Right.
you have to like,
And nobody knew what the other
what,
people were doing. That's the other thing about it.
right. And what's the more powerful emotion? Is it choosing to do the right thing when it's hard to do, or is it living with the stain of people thinking that you're the worst of the worst because of that? So, I thought that was an interesting, thing that you evoked there too.
Yeah, like the kind of, I guess, like the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. But like, I'm sure that in war you're battling with your conscience pretty much constantly.
24/7. Yeah, yeah. I mean, my
um
cousin fought in the Iraqi War, and that's what he said. Or as my dad says too, there was not much difference between those. It's just that one is fought in the sand and the other one was fought in the jungle. But every day you're going to listen to shit explode. You never really get
yeah.
used to that. It's not a sound effect. It's just there's always a rumble and there's always gunfire 24/7. And you never know how close it is. as far as when I say close, how close is, or I guess how close it's getting that it could get to you. Uh, that's
Yep.
that that's something that plays with your conscience even when you come home. I mean, that's why a lot of guys when they come home they want to reenlist and go back because they can't stand the silence of being in everyday life.
Yeah. Back home, I think that, so for me, my thought was, it's one thing to do the armchair quarterback thing of being like, oh, in this fucking insane chaotic situation, you made a decision, it was bad, but like, decision making when it's on paper after the fact is way different than when, all of the crazy chaos that's going around you during war, like, you know, you can't understand necessarily why things were done, or why the way they were done, or whatever it is too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can't. You definitely can't.
Unless you were there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how it
So
should be with everything, though. I mean, it's when it's a split second decision or last minute decision. It's you've got to make. You can get judged all you want, but nobody knows unless they were in that same situation. It's always easy to sit there and break down. Well, I would have done this or done it this way. No, no, you don't know
yep.
that because there's all kinds
Yeah.
of stressors. When all those stressors start hitting, it's all about how everything fights. It's not different than me being in the explosion. You know, it's hey, do y'all really want to go out in the building and die? I mean, that was
Yeah.
I had to sit there and go through all these little things about okay, I can't go out there. How do I go out? I'm looking for a way out. The phone line doesn't work. That was the other thing. The phone line didn't work, and the next thing I'm doing is like there's no windows. Well, there's an air conditioner. Well, that's my out, and that's what I looked for, and that's where I went. It's just you
Yeah.
react. May not always be the right reaction, but I reacted. Luckily it was the right
Yep.
reaction.
No, it's, yeah. And like, even if there was like a emergency protocol for that situation, it's like, who's going to go find the steps to go through or whatever? Like, you just got to do what you're doing. Yeah.
Right, the maintenance guys, then even when I came, because I was off work for a little bit after that, and I came back, and the maintenance guys are like, "How the hell did you get that out of the window?" They're like, "It took us forever to get that thing up there and get it bolted in.
You're like, I was trying to survive.
It took us to hold the thing up in the air." I said, "I didn't care." I said, "It was adrenaline." I said, "I just grabbed it and ripped it out
Yeah.
and tossed."
That's, yeah, that's crazy. Um, One of the things that, throughout reading the book, that I kind of felt, and I felt not necessarily guilty, but like, I was just like, it was a nagging question throughout, was paid off like at the very end of the epilogue, which was like, and I'm not going to remember exactly, how it's said, and if this spoils anything, I don't think it will. Um, but like, one of the kind of sentiments at the very end of the epilogue was kind of like, what does any of this really mean, right, anyway, or something like that. And it's it was so crazy to me that that's kind of where the one of the final thoughts of Miles, because I had that while I was reading the book from time to time. I'm like, like when you zoom out and think about things in a bigger picture, I did get that feeling sometimes, like, what does this mean? What does any of this mean? So the fact that the book kind of ended on that sentiment actually kind of validated the feeling that I was getting throughout. And I was like thinking about talking to you about this, and I'm like, how do I say this in a way that doesn't sound like insulting, that I don't understand the book, but more like I understand the book. I understood the book in a way I didn't know I did until I kind of got to the end. So I don't know if I have a question there, but I don't know what kind of thought you have about that.
Well, it's. I mean, you call it the horror war, but it's the horror of, I mean, people in general, and the psychology of everything. It's, I guess, the psychology of life, because at the end of the book, he's like, it still has more, it leaves you with more questions than answers still, because even after a
Yeah.
war, even after somebody gets killed, after somebody deals drugs, why they deal drugs, why did everything happen the way it happened? Why did it have to happen to this person? Why did it have to happen to that person? Why did you carry all these basically like ghosts? Why'd you carry those? Because there's a lot of those in the book too. Why do you carry those forever? It's like sounds like a virus. It just kind of infects you and you carry it with you. It's your luggage. You carry it everywhere you go. Which is part of mental health. That's why people have mental
Yeah.
issues. They carry these things around like baggage, and they don't know how to deal with them. Or they don't go to get it dealt with, or even if they do, then it becomes into that's the other side of things. Is even if you go to have a diagnosis for something, a lot of times it's just not about talking. They want to prescribe you drugs that maybe make it worse until they
Yeah.
counterbalance it. To get your dopamine levels right. there's and it still offers more questions than answers. I mean, that's the human mind, I guess, the human psyche or the human condition, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been thinking about lately is how important it is for us to understand why about things a lot when there's a lot of times when, there are unforgiving situations that just happen for no good reason that don't have a good explanation. And that's some of the hardest stuff to deal with is like,
Yes.
could have been anybody. And like, how do you get over something that doesn't make sense? Yeah.
The only thing I know you can do with, I mean, is not to keep it bottled up, is to talk about it, but you've got to find the right person to talk to. That's the other thing. Don't don't
Yep.
don't make it about you. Listen to them.
Yeah. And that goes back to what you were saying about people not getting the right help and everything. But I think just person to person, um, maybe being better people at being present for people and just listening
Right.
or whatever it
Learn
is.
how to
Yeah.
listen. Yeah, and we're all guilty
Yeah.
of not doing that. Trust me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. But it's hard to have empathy and it's hard to just say, I'm here, lay it on me or whatever. I think it's not something that we're definitely as Americans. I don't think it's something that we ever kind of get. And we have to kind of develop that on our own.
Yeah, I think the saddest thing
So,
about being an American is that we don't know how good we have it. This is the only country you can live in and bitch about how free you are. You can bitch about your freedom today. It's kind of insulting sometimes. It's like, dude, do you know how people are living? I mean, uh, not to get political, you can take the Ukraine war, whether you agree with it or not. There's people there who are innocent that are stuck in between all that, and they've lost their homes. They're getting dislodged from their homes. They're stuck in the middle. They don't want a war. You know, it's sad. It's
yep.
one of those things that happens. Regardless of what side you're on, there's still these people who are innocent that are involved. You have to always kind of look at the deeper meaning inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, um, but it's like, that's another weird balance where, um, we can love the country that we live in and the stuff that it provides us and the opportunities it gives us. But like,
Appreciation.
if we don't question anything, then it's causing a problem in the other direction. So it's like, we have to find a way to, um, say, this is great. How can we make it better? This is great. How can we make it better? I think. Yeah.
You got to find that balance, I guess is what he would say. Yeah,
Yeah.
like an internal balance. Yeah.
Yeah. But kind of on that general topic, I feel like questioning society, or maybe not questioning, but commentary on society, is a pretty common theme through all of your books. Would you agree that?
Yeah. And there was a lot of, there was a little bit, there was some back and forth because of some of the conversations that are had whenever Miles is at work or whenever he's at the bar. And those are real conversations that I've eavesdrop on. And I'm like, I was trying not to be mean or crude. I'm like, dude, these are blue collar people, and these are the kind of conversations they have. They bitch about their jobs, they bitch about the government, they bitch about paying taxes, and they talk about basketball or sports or whatever. And it's all a combination because they feel like the weight of the world is on their back and nobody gives a shit. And so they're going to sit there and complain. I said they're not sitting in a cubicle all day. So these guys are out here
Yep.
busting their ass. They're getting dirty, and I said all they want to do is they want to pay their taxes, be left alone, and be able to do what they want as long as they're not going out and raping or murdering or mistreating somebody. Most of them, anyway. I'll say most of them, but you know what I'm saying though. Just a normal, just
Right.
want to be left alone and not be bothered. I said and that's the kind of conversations they have. I said that sometimes I said I worked with a guy for about 5 or 6 years when I got bumped to a different job, and he was mad every day he come into work. But when he was off work, he got to go home, drink his beer, hang out with his family. If you run into him, he was in a good mood and he was cheerful. But at work, man, he fucking hated
Yeah.
it.
Um, do you feel like that kind of perspective that you just described is underrepresented or misunderstood, kind of in general?
I think both. I really think
Yeah.
both. 'Cause I always try to tell people, because I've done a couple of interviews where people ask me different things, not necessarily political, but just about my opinion on things. And I'm like, look, what happens in Los Angeles, Chicago, or New York, and how they feel is completely different than how it is in a rural community. I said, because the problems are not the same everywhere. Everybody's got some
Right.
different structure of problems they have to deal with. So you can't always judge you can't judge a book by its cover, and what's good for one
Yep.
side's not always good for the other. So you've got to find that middle ground or try to understand both sides. That's why I always say I try to be middle of the road about things to understand things. Um, because it's not the same everywhere. Even though this is the United
Right.
States, every state is a little bit different. And as you dig into your rural people, working class people, white collar people, blue collar, lower class people, um, they've all got different issues, and different problems to work with.
And I did kind of note in my mind that the book doesn't necessarily, it never gets preachy about anything really.
Yeah, not to be, yeah,
But it wasn't like conspicuously neutral either. Like, because like what you have to do as an author is like you have to go for authenticity. So like when you're writing those conversations that happen in a workplace, the right thing to do is to represent things that actually happen.
right,
So I feel like you did a good job of going authentic without kind of owning a message, if that makes sense.
right, yeah, yeah. I tried to stay, like I said, I try to stay neutral, middle of the road. I try not to shift to one side too much. Just kind of stay in between and make logical points. Common sense. You know what I mean. Try to be a common sense type
Yeah.
person. Yeah,
Yeah. And, it's not like everybody was saying the same thing. There was
yeah,
disagreements and like there was nuance between the characters. So yeah. Um, but I think that one thing that people in general don't do is, like you were saying earlier, try to seek out the understanding of people in different circumstances.
right,
We could definitely bear to do more more of that.
right. Yeah, we definitely could. We definitely could.
Um, Going back to war a little bit, obviously you did research for the book. Is it something that you are fascinated outside of that, like from your personal life connection to it, or just in general?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with the age I grew up in. I went to the VFW with my dad as a kid all the time, and when I wasn't with him, I was with my grandmother who was there playing euchre, or there's a card game called 31, or there at the American Legion Hall. Um, I had uncles, great uncles, and a great uncle that fought in the Korean War. I had my grandmother's like oldest brother fought in, I think it seemed like he fought in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. He lived to be
Wow.
like almost 100 years old. And then I grew up in basically almost like a military family. Rambo, Clint Eastwood, Chuck Norris. Through the '80s and '90s.
Yeah.
Well, basically the '80s and '70s. I was always around. I thought every kid when I was growing up pretty much had the same childhood as me. I grew up loving Rambo. The DI, which is an old black and white movie about a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. You know, um, I just thought that's what all kids were into. Which whenever I read about a lot of guys like Jocko Willenick, I don't know if you know anything about him. His Jocko podcast. He writes a lot of books on leadership. He's a retired Navy SEAL. His childhood sounds very similar to mine. Out playing soldier when you're a kid and pretending you're a soldier, and then watching those types of movies and stuff. And then he went on to join the military. It just with me, it just didn't happen. A lot of it had to do with
Yeah.
guidance. I didn't have that guidance to say, okay, well, let's go and let's sign you up. It was kind of like my dad cracked me up because the first thing he asked me, he's like, "Hey, your mom told me that you've been talking to a recruiter." I said, "Yeah," and he's like, "What did he promise you?" And I'm like, "How the hell did he know he promised me something?" Like, he promised me a Rottweiler. He's like, "Have you seen the dog yet?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't seen the dog yet." And he's like, he started laughing. He goes, "You're not going to see that dog." He said, "If you want to really join the military, you let me know, and we'll talk about it, and I can take you to a recruiter." And I'm like, he'd already started putting doubt in my head. I'm like, okay, he's already telling this guy's lying to me. He already knows it without even talking to the guy. So, but he knew because I mean, he was in the military. But I grew up around all that, and And I still read books in the military. I love reading military books,
Mhm.
from, well, I've got some here on my desk, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's real and it's part of our history. It's part of our culture. And people who serve in war should be recognized and thanked. You should always thank somebody for serving their country, because basically, like my dad told me when he fought in the Vietnam War, the way it was pushed to him was that you're going to fight communism, and that's where he fought. And he felt like
Yep.
he's like he told me, he goes, if somebody come to America and did what I did in Vietnam, I would question it too, because I don't know this person. Even though they're there to help you, you don't know that. Because you've already been lied to by your own country. Well, there's another country who's to say that, and they're on your personal property, which over there not necessarily
Yeah.
personal property, but here it is your personal property. So I would feel the same way. It's an invasion. That's what it feels like, and you're trying to make this person understand that's I'm here to help you. It's not always easy to explain. And then you always have a
Yeah.
guy who wants to float outside the lines and do something wrong and make you look bad. Do what you're not supposed to do. My dad was always, that's probably where I get my middle of the road from, because that's how my dad is about a lot of stuff. He tries to see both sides. You know.
Yeah. I feel like that comes through with Miles in the book too, because I think if it wasn't specifically said, it was implied that like there's that I understand their perspective of like this person is the enemy when we're trying to do a good thing. So I feel like if it wasn't like implicitly said, it was definitely something that I pulled out of the story when I was reading it. So,
And I mean, that comes from my
um,
childhood too. I mean, that's just the way I was raised. My parents didn't. They had friends from all walks of life, and I never thought about that till I was older. I'm kind of like, wow, they weren't judgmental people. It didn't matter. I mean, they had gay friends, they had people of color friends, they had white, they had, and that's who they go out, play cards, dance, party. They used to go to music and all that kind of stuff. I never thought much about that till I was older. I was kind of like, well, I never really got into knowing that there was crazy people in the world till I started working in a factory. And I was like, holy shit! It was like a culture shock. Me and the guys I work with always talk about it was like a culture shock when come to the factory, because we're like 19, 20 years old, and it's like, holy shit, this is insane. You know.
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, once you get out of your bubble of youth and into the world at large, suddenly you're experiencing things in a different
Well,
way.
because if you came from a family that didn't really judge people, or you never seen the judgment, it's really weird, because you go in the factories, like these lines were drawn. It's like, what the hell, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yep. Well, and we're kind of similar in age. I'm 44. Um, and so I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I grew up similarly. My family was very like good to everyone kind of thing. And but there was like the things that kind of permeated culture where after the fact I'm like, oh my god, that was really racist, or oh my god, that was really
Right.
homophobic, and it was just like something that was not called out yet, you know. So it was just something that happened in life, and only later on I was like, ooh, I'm glad I never really like that never stuck with me, and I didn't say those things or do those, you know, like that kind of thing. So um I think we have kind of a transitional generation for some of the way that like society feels about how people are treated.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I really feel like, I mean, this is totally away from the book, but then with the book is that a lot of people don't know their history. And I guess they quit teaching history in school years ago. I mean, I studied history since I think we started off with Indiana history when I was like third grade. Then you went to world history and U.S. history. And when I got in high school, it was up to you if you wanted to take U.S. history, but you definitely had to take world history. And I'm like, do they not teach all this anymore? On top of, we also had somebody that did like a study on the Bill family, and it traced all of our roots back. And I've got that. I feel like people don't know where they come from, so they don't. It's like they don't know the whole story. They
Yep.
always want to point a finger at something. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's more to the story than what you're saying. Um, it's like people don't understand where they come from anymore. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I kind of try to say that. I think there's some things in there about Miles in the book where he always talks about kind of knowing where he comes from, and how you treat people. Because there's some things like Pi. Pi is a real person. I never got to meet him. I always saw him from afar, and everybody would talk about Pi. And Pi was a guy that when he retired, I think he worked in that factory for gosh, I bet he was in there for 30 or 40 years, and he didn't live long after he retired. But I think he could have went and I think he might have actually played college basketball, um, and he decided to work in a factory for whatever reason. Because back in the 50s, or I think well, I guess that factory started in the 60s. Um, it was good money. It was just dirty. It was so dirty. To hear the horror stories of the people starting in there, and he stuck it out. It's hard
Yeah.
to if you didn't go to college, it's hard to find a job making $30 an hour. And he stuck it out, and he went in every day and put in his time, and he got 3 and 4 days off a week. But
Yeah.
he was a real person. And then that was some of that part of his story was me hearing rumors from one of the foremans that I knew there that was really just a real racist shithead, and everybody would tell you, it's like you couldn't believe the way this guy acted. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah. You said something interesting though, was the not knowing your history, and I feel like, no one's ever going to get it perfect, but I think to a point in my life where I was never raised really valuing spending time with family in general. We were all everybody kind of kept to themselves. It was just we weren't like a big, you see your cousins every Saturday type of family. And it was only when I was kind of doing my own thing in my 20s that I was like, why don't we see each other? Why don't, like, these people are fascinating. They're,
Right.
they're close to me. Like, we have a shared thing that no one else I have in my life does. So I started to kind of like push for more involvement with my family. And I think that sometimes your upbringing just doesn't tell you that certain things are valuable, and you have to find that on your own. And maybe sometimes you just don't find it. So that's a tricky thing too. Like, perspective is something that's always, there's work to be done, I think, in a way too.
Right. Yeah. See, we were always either at my dad's mother's house every weekend, and aunts, uncles, cousins were always there. And then, my cousins on my mom's side, I was around pretty much every weekend on my grandparents' farm. And my grandfather was a big coon hunter. He was always out raccoon hunting because he raised hound dogs. And the amount of
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that because I was a kid, but the amount of women that came in there that stayed with my grandmother while their husbands hunted with my grandfather, and you got to hear the problems that this wife is having with her husband while he's out hunting with my grandpa. You heard all these different stories and perspectives of stuff, but there was just a lot of culture I was always around, and I wish I'd had a notebook to write everything down, and it was all different types of culture too. That was the other thing. I won't even get into all that, but there was just, my grandfather hunted with all kinds of different people from all walks of life. They
Yeah.
were just, it was, whether they were rich or poor, it was a sport that everybody was into. My grandfather had coon dogs since he was probably 10 or 11 years old. That's something he made like C's and D's in high school, but he was an A+ person when it come to training a dog and hunting. He did dog shows and all kinds of hunting events all over the Midwest. He was well known at some point. I still have pictures and stuff. I've actually got an entire
Yeah.
photo album. It looks like an encyclopedia of all the dogs that he had throughout his
Wow.
life, with little stories he'd write on the back of it about the dog and how well it had hit a trail and how well it would tree and how well it would do. And then one of the last lines would always be and he's dead. The dog died. That kind of thing. But there was always that culture of being around family.
That makes me think of a regret that I have is my grandfather on my mother's side, my step grandfather on my mother's side. Um, I never really paid much attention to what he was talking about as I was, growing up and everything. And not, in the years before he passed, he starts talking about all this interesting stuff when he was younger, where he was like doing stuff with like really high up people in like Chicago politics and stuff. And I was in my head, I was like, why haven't you fucking asked this guy about his interesting life way earlier? Because like, it's kind of too late now. And so I never really got a chance to flesh out a lot of that stuff. And so that's a regret of mine, is like, maybe people just need to like care more about the people in their lives, because everybody's interesting and
Yep.
has a story to tell. So
It's
yeah.
always interesting to see where somebody comes from and what they dealt with to get here, or where they're at, and how they
Yeah.
got to where they're at in life. That's what I always
Yeah,
say, that
for sure.
there's so many people that are younger that don't they don't even know where their parents or their grandparents or their aunts or their uncles came from or what they dealt with to get where they're at. I mean,
Yep.
that's what built this country, regardless, good or bad. That's your history. It's important to know those things.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I'm maybe doing this podcast where I interview authors all the time for the last 10 years has kind of clued me into like, hey, when you talk to people, you're pretty much always going to get something fascinating. So I kind of benefited from
Well,
that perspective got dropped on me. Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's
So,
one of the reasons that people write. They're interested in a culture, regardless of whether it's
yep.
literary, crime, fantasy. It all has there's a realism to it that creates those characters and those situations. Regardless how they flip them
Yeah.
upside down. Yeah, it always comes from a real place.
Yep. So going, because we probably should be wrapping up pretty soon. Going back to the book, and I don't even know if this is a good question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, is there anything that you're hoping that people will take away from this book, or anything like that, or are you just looking for people to have a good time reading a book?
I would like them. I mean, even though other people know about the horrors of war, but just to understand something more about humanity. What people have to offer and the hardships that people actually go through. Re- yeah, war is a horrible thing. Mental health is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
Working in a factory can sometimes be a horrible thing. Age is a horrible thing, but it's something we all have to deal with. Good or
Yeah.
bad. It's just. I guess it's that in the book. It's a lot about choices. It's positive or negative, but choice A ends up interpreting choice B, which creates this action to a chain reaction to this reaction. Um, I hope it shines a light on. Regardless, I know people. I've heard people say it's bleak, but I hope it shines a bigger light on blue collar and working class people and the things that they go through and strive. Because they are just normal people. Just
Hmm.
trying to get by. They just want to be left alone sometimes, but they're just trying to get by the best way. They don't want to be bothered by lots of politics and stuff like that.
Well, one of the things that, as I got toward the end of it, that I thought was great was that it ends more optimistic than maybe you would think it does. And it does play on that whole idea of choices. And like when we make, even if the right choice is the hard choice, it's because of XYZ. I feel like there was kind of an optimism or like, um, that kind of a thing at the end of it. And that was, in a book like this that is so bleak and everything. I think it was a really great way to kind of tie things up is like, this isn't like the glorifying crime kind of like
No,
thing. It's like, hey, shit happens to people and it's hard and sometimes it's impossible, but like it's possible to go, on the right path instead of, a wrong path. It's probably not easy to do or something like that. Like that kind of, I know I was kind of verbose about that, but like that's kind of the feeling I was left with, which was cool.
right? Yeah, the original rough draft. I think, and not a spoiler or anything, but I think the way I had it was that Nathaniel and Miles aren't together. Um, and there's a thing that where they cross paths, and Nathaniel ends up murdering Shelby, which doesn't happen in the book. And then the way it ended was that Miles ended up finding out how this happens, and then ends up killing Nathaniel, which doesn't happen in the book either. It was a completely different ending. So and which we went back to a lot of bad choices to get there. Yeah, I still had the whole LSD trip and all those types of things too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. And in my mind I was like, is this an evolution of Frank's writing or because I'm but and then I question myself again. I'm like, am I painting his writing as more violent or negative than, it actually is? So like, but uh, the ending and the way it plays out really stood out to me as um like not necessarily refreshing from you personally as an author, but refreshing maybe right now for like the way things are in the world to see the book end up this way was like it's kind of the kind of story I think I want or need at the moment. So
Right.
um, yeah,
It
good
was.
timing
It's
on that.
more. I guess it's more a little realistic. I guess you could say this is probably the most realistic book that I've written. Not the others aren't. There's elements of realism, but this is probably the most just, I guess, grounded book that I've written as far as really shining a light on the middle class, blue collar, working class folks, that kind of thing. Where you, as you said, where it's not just action. I mean, there's action in the book and there's movement in the book, but it's not like nonstop violence and blood and gore.
Right. Yep.
Somebody's not getting hit in the
Yeah.
head with a 2x4, or shot in the face, or you know.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that that type of um, there's an author, Megn Abbott, who
Yeah,
I love, and her like when I was one of her more recent books, it occurred to me that like there's never of like a weapon that causes problems. It's never. It's always like the internal struggles of people and their flaws and like their actions is what drives all of like the terror and the drama and stuff, and it's so effective because it's just so relatable, I think.
yeah. It's always that underlying tension. It's
Yeah.
what's going to happen. It's that under. Yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really good at that.
She's a brilliant author.
Yeah, she
She's
is.
yeah. And fingers crossed, I know she's got another one coming out, so I would love to talk to her because I've been reading her stuff for years and have not talked to her, but she's just a really impressive person. So you've got something that you're working on now.
Yeah, I've been working on it probably since 2018, off and on. So yeah, yeah. I've just turned in
Cool.
120 rough pages to my agent to look over and make a proposal to FSG and see where we go. So
Are you doing now that there's not as much of a why am I stumbling over this? Now that a pandemic isn't restricting things the way that it was, are you doing like promotions and readings and stuff for Back to the Dirt?
we're doing some stuff. We're gonna do well. I'm going to be leaving on the 17th. I've got an event in Oklahoma on the 18th at Panhandle College. I'm doing a thing out there with them. There's an associate professor that when he was in, I guess, like grad school, he had interviewed me, did an interview with me, and now he's teaching there and wanted to know if I would come out. There's a grant to
Nice.
bring an author out every year for it's called the No Man's Land Reading Series. And I said, cool. And then on the way back home, we're going to go down to Mississippi, and I'm doing an event down at Oxford at the Square Books. Going to go down there and sign stock, and then there's a radio show thing they have. Like I think it's once a week or a couple times a month, and I get to go on there for 15 minutes and read for 5 minutes and do like a 10-minute interview, and it goes to, I guess it's kind of like an NPR type thing, and they have musicians there that play afterwards, and it goes to all the radio stations that connect to the state, and then I'll come home. There's a couple other podcasts I'm doing, and then we're doing an event at Carmichael's in Louisville on the release day of the book, and then 2 days after that, we're doing a thing at Beef O'Brady's for like a hometown release thing. We're doing it on a
Nice.
Thursday in the at the restaurant. Ashley Irwin, she's gonna do it with me. I don't know if have you ever heard her read?
No.
Wow, she's a hell of a. I mean, she just nails the voices and everything. Well, I mean, it's her book, of course, but she just really nails it. She's
Right.
going to be there.
Nice.
Butcher Cabin Books is coming down for that to sell books, and then there's a couple other podcasts that we're doing some stuff, and I guess whoever else reaches out, go from there and see what happens. I think there's a couple of possibly places to write essays and things like that for. We were talking
Cool.
about that before Rose left. She's on vacation, I think, for a week because she was trying to figure out either to use the afterward in the book or if I had anything else that I could write about. And I was like, well, I've actually got some stuff on my laptop that we've never used before. If you want to read over and see what you want to do. So yeah, there's a bunch of little things going on. So we'll see what happens.
Sweet.
But yeah, they're actually doing, as you said, people are actually in person again. So thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still super cautious because like now that I've gone through that treatment, like compromised immune system and stuff.
Oh
But
yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that.
it's it's heartening to see that like people can do some of the stuff that they were doing before. So especially like we haven't talked in years, but I talked to so many people who had to figure out how to promote a book in a pandemic, and so I'm happy for you that this is coming out on the tail end of that stuff, so that hopefully it's like not as restricting or
Yeah,
something.
because I had a buddy that released a book right in the middle of all that, and it's like it kind of destroyed him being able to do it. He had all these things lined up and made all these connections, and then he couldn't do anything. It was just kind of like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yep.
it
Yeah.
sucks.
So. Um, Yeah, weird time. But I'm glad. I'm always so fucking happy when I get to read something new from you, and
I appreciate it.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad we got to catch up after I was listening to the last interview we did. I think was for Savage, so long ago. Like it's a whole different life. But thank you so much for
Oh, anything you need, man,
giving me a
anytime.
great thing to
I
read.
appreciate it. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it. Yeah.